Sometimes you just want to like nail that perfect English pronunciation. So
Sure.
you can speak with that real confidence.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're diving deep into today.
Yeah.
Like all those expert tips and techniques that you've sent us,
Yeah.
figuring out how to make them work for you.
Absolutely.
We're even going to look at some AI tools that can help along the way.
Very cool.
That's cool.
You know, I think it's important to remember that pronunciation
Yeah.
isn't about like losing your accent or sounding like a textbook recording.
Right.
It's about clarity, being able to communicate effectively.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what you're looking for.
Okay, so it's not about erasing who you are,
Right.
more about being understood.
Yeah.
But let's face it, there are some common traps that we all fall into. The silent letters that seem to come out of nowhere.
Right.
Or stressing the wrong syllable.
Oh, yeah.
And completely changing the meaning of a word.
Absolutely.
Like,
yes, and one of the most effective ways to overcome those pitfalls, I think, is by training your ear to hear the nuances of English pronunciation.
Okay.
It's like when you first start learning a musical instrument, you spend a lot of time listening to experienced musicians to get a feel for the rhythm and flow.
So you're saying that immersing myself in English,
Yes.
like listening to podcasts, watching movies, or even just listening to music can help me get a better sense of how it should sound.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And don't just passively listen.
Okay.
Pay attention to the intonation, the rise and fall of the voice.
So it's not just about like the words themselves, but how they're delivered.
Yes. It's like adding punctuation to your speech.
Oh, okay.
Giving it emotion and making it more engaging.
That's a really interesting way to think about it.
Yeah.
But what about those specific sounds that just seem impossible to get right?
Yeah.
Like the death sound or that rolling R.
Right. Those sounds can definitely be tricky.
Yeah.
Because they don't exist in a lot of other languages.
Right.
One approach is to think of it like learning the mechanics of each sound. Phonetic charts can be really helpful here.
I've seen those charts, but honestly, they kind of look like hieroglyphics to me.
They can seem intimidating at first.
Yeah.
But they're actually quite simple once you understand the basics.
Okay.
Each symbol on the chart represents a specific sound in English.
Right.
So for the sound, you'd look for the symbol that represents that sound, and then see how it's described in terms of tongue placement and airflow.
Okay, so it's like a map of your mouth.
Exactly.
Showing you exactly where your tongue and teeth should be to create that sound.
Yes.
I think I'm starting to get it.
Good.
And once you understand how to physically form those sounds, it's helpful to record yourself speaking and compare it to a native speaker.
Yeah, it's like having a pronunciation coach right in your pocket.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
It's like having a personal playback to see where I'm going wrong. I'm always surprised by how different I sound in a recording.
Me too.
And speaking of breaking things down, another helpful technique is to focus on syllables.
Yes.
Longer words can feel overwhelming.
Right.
But if you break them down into smaller chunks and pay attention to syllable stress, it becomes much easier to manage.
Absolutely.
I've definitely noticed how different syllable stress can change the meaning of a word.
Exactly. For example, the word content as a noun is stressed on the first syllable, while content as an adjective is stressed on the second syllable.
Okay.
Mastering this can make a huge difference in how clearly you're understood.
So it's not just about individual sounds, but also about how we put those sounds together to form words and sentences. Is there anything else I can do to improve that flow and rhythm of my speech?
One technique that's particularly helpful for developing natural sounding speech is called shadowing.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of it?
I have, but I've never really understood how it works.
It's actually quite simple.
Okay.
You listen to a short segment of English speech, like a sentence or two from a podcast or video.
Right.
And then you immediately repeat it.
Okay.
Trying to mimic the speaker as closely as possible.
So you're basically echoing a native speaker to absorb their speaking style.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You're paying attention not only to their pronunciation of individual sounds,
Yeah.
but also to their intonation, pace, and rhythm.
Wow.
It's like learning to dance by following the steps of an expert dancer.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It's not just about imitating the sounds, but also about capturing the music of their speech.
Exactly. And the more you practice shadowing,
Yeah.
the more natural and fluent your own English will start to sound.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here today. From training our ears to breaking down sounds and even mimicking native speakers.
Mm-hmm.
But I think before we go any further, we need to talk about, like, why we're doing all of this.
That's a great point.
Like, what's the motivation behind wanting to improve pronunciation?
Right. Having a clear purpose can be incredibly motivating.
Yeah.
It's like having a destination in mind when you set out on a journey.
Mm-hmm.
Are you aiming to feel more confident in professional settings?
Okay.
Or maybe you want to connect more deeply with English-speaking friends and family?
For me, it's about feeling comfortable expressing myself.
Yeah.
No matter who I'm talking to.
Right.
I don't want to hold back because I'm worried about mispronouncing a word or not being understood.
I think that's a goal a lot of us can relate to.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how to get there.
Okay.
Where do you even begin if you want to improve your pronunciation?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
There are so many tips and techniques out there.
Mm-hmm,
It can be overwhelming to know where to start.
I always recommend starting with a self-assessment.
Okay.
Take some time to really listen to yourself speak English.
Mm-hmm.
What sounds or patterns do you find challenging?
Right.
Which ones feel more natural?
So it's like taking inventory of my pronunciation strengths and weaknesses
Exactly.
before I start working on anything specific.
Once you have a clearer picture of your starting point, you can tailor your practice to target those areas that need the most attention.
Right.
Maybe you need to focus on those tricky vowel sounds.
Okay.
Or perhaps it's about mastering word stress and intonation.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's about being strategic and focusing on what will make the biggest difference. But I have to admit, I sometimes get discouraged when I hear native speakers and realize how far I have to go.
It's important to remember that progress takes time and consistent effort.
Yeah.
Don't get hung up on trying to sound exactly like a native speaker.
Right.
Instead, focus on making gradual improvements that feel good to you.
Okay.
Celebrate those wins, big or small, and keep that motivation flowing.
I appreciate that reminder.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the pursuit of perfection and forget to enjoy the process.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to experiment with different techniques.
Okay.
We've talked about shadowing.
Yeah.
But you can also try recording yourself reading aloud, exploring those AI pronunciation apps, or even having fun with some tongue twisters.
Yeah.
The key is to find what works best for you and make it a regular part of your routine.
Speaking of different techniques, are there any that are particularly effective for mastering specific pronunciation challenges?
Absolutely. Let's say you're struggling with the distinction between minimal pairs like ship and sheep, or leave and live. Practicing these pairs specifically can train your ear to hear those subtle differences and help you produce them accurately.
You know, I've heard about minimal pairs before, but I've never really understood how to use them effectively.
Okay.
Could you give us a little more insight into that?
Of course, minimal pairs are like pronunciation puzzles.
Oh, okay.
That help you isolate and master those tricky sounds. For example, let's take the words ship and sheep.
Okay.
They differ only by the vowel sound.
Right. Ship has a short I sound.
Yes.
And sheep has a long E sound.
Exactly. Now, when you practice minimal pairs, you're essentially training your ear to distinguish between those two sounds.
Okay.
You can listen to recordings of native speakers saying the words, focusing on the subtle differences in pronunciation.
Okay.
And then you can try to repeat the words yourself.
Gotcha.
Paying close attention to how your mouth moves and how the sounds feel.
So it's about actively listening and then consciously trying to reproduce those sounds.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
And the great thing about minimal pairs is that you can find lists and exercises online or even create your own based on the sounds you're struggling with.
Okay.
It's a very targeted and effective way to improve your pronunciation.
I'm definitely going to add minimal pair practice to my pronunciation routine.
Good.
Now, you mentioned earlier that identifying your why can be a powerful motivator.
Yes.
Could you give us some concrete examples
Sure.
of how people might connect their pronunciation goals to their personal or professional aspirations?
Of course. Imagine you're working in a global company where English is the primary language of communication. By improving your pronunciation, you'll feel more confident participating in meetings, giving presentations, and networking with colleagues.
Makes sense.
This can lead to better collaboration, career advancement, and a stronger sense of belonging in your workplace.
That makes sense. It's like removing a communication barrier. And allowing your ideas and expertise to shine through.
Exactly. Or perhaps you're passionate about traveling and connecting with people from different cultures. Being able to communicate clearly and confidently in English can open up a world of possibilities. You can have deeper conversations with locals, make new friends, and truly immerse yourself in the local culture.
I can definitely see how that would enrich travel experiences immensely.
Yes.
It's about going beyond the surface level and really connecting with people on a meaningful level.
Precisely. And even if your goals are more personal, like feeling more comfortable speaking English with friends or family, improving your pronunciation can have a profound impact on your self-esteem and overall enjoyment of the language.
It's about feeling confident and comfortable in your own skin, regardless of the situation.
Exactly.
Now, before we move on, I'm curious if there are any common myths or misconceptions about pronunciation that you'd like to debunk.
Oh, there are definitely a few.
Okay.
One common myth is that you need to sound exactly like a native speaker to be considered fluent. This simply isn't true.
Oh, okay.
Pronunciation is about clarity and comprehensibility, not about erasing your unique accent or identity.
That's a relief to hear.
Yeah.
I think a lot of learners put pressure on themselves to achieve this unrealistic standard of native-like perfection.
It's important to remember that your accent is part of who you are.
Yeah.
And it adds richness and diversity to the English language. The goal is to be understood and to feel comfortable expressing yourself, not to sound like someone else.
So it's about embracing your own voice.
Yes.
While still striving for clear and effective communication.
Exactly. Another common misconception is that pronunciation is something you either have or you don't.
Oh, okay.
But the truth is, pronunciation is a skill that can be learned and improved with dedicated effort and the right approach.
That's encouraging to hear.
Yeah.
It means that anyone, regardless of their background or starting point, has the potential to become a more confident and effective English speaker.
Absolutely. It's about having the right mindset, the right tools, and the willingness to practice consistently.
And to remember that there's no one right way to pronounce English.
Exactly.
There's so many different accents and variations around the world, which is what makes the language so vibrant and interesting.
Absolutely. The beauty of English lies in its adaptability and evolution.
Yeah.
As long as you're being understood and feeling confident in your communication.
Right.
That's what truly matters.
This has been so insightful. I feel like I'm starting to see pronunciation in a whole new light.
I'm glad to hear that. Now I think it's time to move on to the final part
of
our pronunciation deep dive, where we'll delve into some specific strategies for tackling those tricky sounds and patterns that often trip up English learners.
I'm excited to get into the nitty-gritty of those pronunciation challenges and learn some practical tips for overcoming them.
Good.
So we've talked about training our ears, breaking down sounds, and even mimicking native speakers. But I think before we go any further, we need to talk about why we're doing all of this.
That's a great point.
What's the motivation behind wanting to improve pronunciation?
Having a clear purpose can be incredibly motivating. It's like having a destination in mind when you set out on a journey. Are you aiming to feel more confident in professional settings?
Oh, okay.
Or maybe you want to connect more deeply with English-speaking friends and family?
For me, it's about feeling comfortable expressing myself, no matter who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
I don't want to hold back because I'm worried about mispronouncing a word or not being understood.
I think that's a goal a lot of us can relate to.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how to get there.
Okay.
Where do you even begin if you want to improve your pronunciation?
That's a good question. There's so many tips and techniques out there. It can be overwhelming to know where to start.
I always recommend starting with a self-assessment.
Okay.
Take some time to really listen to yourself speak English.
Okay.
What sounds or patterns do you find challenging? Which ones feel more natural?
So it's like taking inventory of my pronunciation strengths and weaknesses.
Exactly.
Before I start working on anything specific.
Once you have a clear picture of your starting point, you can tailor your practice to target those areas that need the most attention.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to focus on those tricky vowel sounds, or perhaps it's about mastering word stress and intonation.
Right, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's about being strategic and focusing on what will make the biggest difference.
Uh-huh.
But I have to admit, I sometimes get discouraged when I hear native speakers and realize how far I have to go.
It's important to remember that progress takes time and consistent effort.
Right.
Don't get hung up on trying to sound exactly like a native speaker. Instead, focus on making gradual improvements that feel good to you. Celebrate those wins, big or small, and keep that motivation flowing.
I appreciate that reminder. It's easy to get caught up in the pursuit of perfection and forget to enjoy the process.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to experiment with different techniques.
Okay.
We've talked about shadowing, but you can also try recording yourself reading aloud, exploring those AI pronunciation apps, or even having fun with some tongue twisters.
Right.
The key is to find what works best for you and make it a regular part of your routine.
Speaking of different techniques, are there any that are particularly effective for mastering specific pronunciation challenges?
Absolutely. Let's say you're struggling with the distinction between minimal pairs like ship and sheep or leave and live.
Mm-hmm.
Practicing these pairs specifically can train your ear to hear those subtle differences and help you produce them accurately.
You know, I've heard about minimal pairs before, but I've never really understood how to use them effectively. Could you give us a little more insight into that?
Of course, minimal pairs are like pronunciation puzzles that help you isolate and master those tricky sounds.
Mm.
For example, let's take the words ship and sheep.
Okay.
They differ only by the vowel sound.
Right. Ship has a short I sound, and sheep has a long E sound.
Exactly. Now, when you practice minimal pairs, you're essentially training your ear to distinguish between those two sounds. You can listen to recordings of native speakers saying the words, focusing on the subtle differences in pronunciation, and then you can try to repeat the words yourself, paying close attention to how your mouth moves and how the sounds feel.
So it's about actively listening and then consciously trying to reproduce those sounds. That makes a lot of sense.
And the great thing about minimal pairs is that you can find lists and exercises online or even create your own based on the sounds you're struggling with. It's a very targeted and effective way to improve your pronunciation.
I'm definitely going to add minimal pair practice to my pronunciation routine. Now, you mentioned earlier that identifying your why can be a powerful motivator.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us some concrete examples of how people might connect their pronunciation goals to their personal or professional aspirations?
Of course. Imagine you're working in a global company where English is the primary language of communication.
Okay.
By improving your pronunciation, you'll feel more confident participating in meetings, giving presentations, and networking with colleagues.
Right.
This can lead to better collaboration, career advancement, and a stronger sense of belonging in your workplace.
That makes sense. It's like removing a communication barrier and allowing your ideas and expertise to shine through.
Exactly. Or perhaps you're passionate about traveling and connecting with people from different cultures. Being able to communicate clearly and confidently in English can open up a world of possibilities.
Right.
You can have deeper conversations with locals, make new friends, and truly immerse yourself in the local culture.
I can definitely see how that would enrich travel experiences immensely. It's about going beyond the surface level and really connecting with people on a meaningful level.
Precisely. And even if your goals are more personal, like feeling more comfortable speaking English with friends or family, improving your pronunciation can have a profound impact on your self-esteem and overall enjoyment of the language.
It's about feeling confident and comfortable in your own skin, regardless of the situation.
Exactly.
Now, before we move on, I'm curious if there are any common myths or misconceptions about pronunciation that you'd like to debunk.
Oh, there are definitely a few. One common myth is that you need to sound exactly like a native speaker to be considered fluent.
Okay.
This simply isn't true. Pronunciation is about clarity and comprehensibility, not about erasing your unique accent or identity.
That's a relief to hear. I think a lot of learners put pressure on themselves to achieve this unrealistic standard of native-like perfection.
It's important to remember that your accent is part of who you are, and it adds richness and diversity to the English language.
Right.
The goal is to be understood and to feel comfortable expressing yourself, not to sound like someone else.
So it's about embracing your own voice while still striving for clear and effective communication.
Exactly. Another common misconception is that pronunciation is something you either have or you don't. But the truth is, pronunciation is a skill that can be learned and improved with dedicated effort and the right approach.
That's encouraging to hear.
Yeah.
It means that anyone, regardless of their background or starting point, has the potential to become a more confident and effective English speaker.
Absolutely. It's about having the right mindset, the right tools, and the willingness to practice consistently.
And to remember that there's no one right way to pronounce English.
Oh,
There are so many different accents and variations around the world, which is what makes the language so vibrant and interesting.
absolutely. The beauty of English lies in its adaptability and evolution. As long as you're being understood and feeling confident in your communication, that's what truly matters.
This has been so insightful. I feel like I'm starting to see pronunciation in a whole new light.
I'm glad to hear that. Now I think it's time to move on to the final part of our pronunciation deep dive, where we'll delve into some specific strategies for tackling those tricky sounds and patterns that often trip up English learners.
I'm excited to get into the nitty-gritty of those pronunciation challenges and learn some practical tips for overcoming them. All right, let's roll up our sleeves and tackle those notorious sounds that often tie our tongues in knots.
Okay.
The th sound
Yeah.
is a classic culprit.
Right.
It exists in two forms, voiced as in this and unvoiced as in think. I remember struggling with that one for ages.
It's a sound that doesn't exist in many languages.
Right.
So it's understandable why it poses a challenge.
Yeah.
The key is to position your tongue lightly between your teeth
Okay.
and gently release air. Think of it as creating a slight friction between your tongue and teeth.
So it's almost like a subtle lisp.
You could think of it that way.
Okay.
The voiced eth, as in this, involves vibrating your vocal cords, while the unvoiced tiet, as in think, doesn't. It's a subtle difference, but it can make a big impact on your clarity.
I never realized there were two different types of TL sounds.
Right.
I'm going to have to pay closer attention to that.
Yeah.
Another sound that I often trip over is the R sound.
Okay.
I know it's different from the rolling R in some other languages, but I can never seem to get it quite right.
The English R is unique in that it doesn't involve a full tongue roll.
Okay.
It's more of a gliding sound. And the exact pronunciation can vary depending on the accent.
Right.
Think of it as drawing your tongue back slightly towards the roof of your mouth while you pronounce the sound.
So instead of rolling my tongue,
Yeah.
I should be focusing on this back gliding motion.
Exactly.
That's interesting. Are there any other tips for mastering the R sound?
One helpful trick is to practice words that contain the R sound in different positions.
Okay.
For example, you could practice words where the R is at the beginning of a word, like red or rabbit,
Right.
and then words where the R is in the middle of a word, like very or forest.
That's a great suggestion. It's all about breaking down the sound and practicing it in different contexts. Now let's move on to vowels.
Okay.
English has so many vowel sounds.
Right.
They can be really subtle and tricky to differentiate.
Vowels are definitely a key area to focus on.
Yeah.
The good news is that you can visualize vowel sounds using a vowel chart.
Okay.
A vowel chart is like a map of your mouth showing you where to position your tongue and how to shape your lips to produce each sound.
I've seen those charts before, but I've never really known how to use them effectively.
They're actually quite simple once you understand the layout.
Okay.
The chart is divided into sections based on the height of your tongue and the position of your tongue in your mouth. So, for example, the vowel sound in sheep is produced with your tongue high and forward in your mouth,
Right.
while the vowel sound in ship is produced with your tongue lower and more central in your mouth.
So it's like having a visual guide for how to move my mouth to create those specific sounds.
Exactly.
I think I'm starting to get the hang of it.
Good. And don't be afraid to exaggerate the sounds at first.
Okay.
It might feel a bit silly,
Yeah.
but it helps you train your mouth muscles to make those subtle distinctions.
That's a great tip. It's like doing pronunciation stretches for your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, earlier we talked about word stress and intonation,
Right.
which are crucial for sounding natural and fluent.
Absolutely.
Can you give us some practical tips for mastering these aspects of pronunciation?
Word stress is all about emphasizing the correct syllable in a word.
Mm-hmm.
While there are some general rules,
Okay.
like nouns often having stress on the first syllable,
Right.
there are always exceptions.
Right.
The best way to learn word stress is to listen carefully to native speakers
Okay.
and pay attention to which syllable they emphasize.
So it's about training my ear to hear those subtle shifts in emphasis.
Exactly. And you can also use online dictionaries or pronunciation apps to hear the correct pronunciation of words and practice stressing the right syllable.
And what about intonation? I know it's important,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not always sure how to use it correctly.
Intonation is the rise and fall of your voice as you speak.
Right.
It's like adding punctuation to your speech, helping to convey meaning, emotion, and even subtle nuances like sarcasm or surprise.
So it's not just about what I say, but also about how I say it.
Precisely. For example, a rising intonation at the end of a sentence typically indicates a question, while a falling intonation indicates a statement.
Okay.
And you can also use intonation to emphasize certain words or phrases,
right,
adding emphasis and drama to your speech.
It's like adding the musicality to my speaking.
Exactly. The best way to improve your intonation is to listen to native speakers and try to mimic their patterns. You can also practice reading aloud, paying close attention to the rise and fall of your voice.
This has been an incredibly informative deep dive into the world of pronunciation. I feel like I've learned so much about the mechanics of sounds, the importance of listening, and the power of practice.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Me too.
Remember, the journey to pronunciation mastery is ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
But with dedication and the right approach, you can achieve your goals and unlock a whole new level of confidence and fluency.
And remember, dear listener, there's an incredible community of fellow English learners out there who are going through the same journey.
Absolutely.
Don't be afraid to reach out, share tips, and support each other.
Exactly.
We hope you found this deep dive valuable and that you're feeling inspired to take your English pronunciation to the next level.
Absolutely.
Until next time, happy practicing.